He rushed at me, his gun leveled at my heart. But I was quicker on the trigger. Ever see him before? Asked a police sergeant. Never. My guess as to his identity was based on press pictures I've seen. Gosh, Mr. Camberton, blurted one of the reporters. You'll get the $25,000 reward. That's so. I hadn't thought of it. I was merely trying to protect my life and property. I'll agree that perhaps I do deserve some reward for having rid society of a dangerous killer. Highly pleased with himself, the lawyer then posed for innumerable newspaper photographs. He posed pointing his gun at the camera, pointing his finger at the wall safe, shaking hands with the sergeant, shaking hands with the hotel manager, with bellhops, with chambermaids, with almost everyone excepting his dead victim. He obliged the cameraman, willingly refusing only the request of one who wanted him to stand with one foot resting on the corpse, in the manner of a big game hunter. This, the autopsy declared, would be beneath his dignity. Not until the dark hour just before the dawn was he left alone. Excitedly he turned the leaves of his telephone directory, seeking the address of the ideal shoe repair shop. Here it was, 692 Elwell Court. Less than 4 blocks away. He patted the revolvers in his pockets, took an electric torch from his bureau, put on his hat and went out, leaving the building by a rear stairway. Although only a few blocks from the brightly lighted corner of Clark and Broadway, Elwell Court was a shabby little side street of dismal, frame shanties. Bleakest of these was number 692 with "shoe repairing" crudely lettered on the glass of the front door. It was hardly a place you would suspect of being the depository of $100,000 in cash. Camberton, however, was confident that he would find this sum. He knew his crooks and had correctly judged Dinah as the simpleton that he was. The fool hadn't even put a modern lock on the door. Camberton's skeleton key opened it easily. Inside, he observed that the weakened rays of a distant street lamp penetrated the grimy front windows just enough to cast a dim and eerie light, blocked out here and there by machinery and furnishings which cast grotesque and misleading shadows. Feeling his way, he stepped forward. His shin encountered something in the dark, something that sprang through the air with a hissing, spitting sound. 2 yellow eyes glared balefully at him. He flashed his torch at it and cursed under his breath at the cat that arched its back in the glare. He threw the beam around the room to get his bearings. There was a door at the rear of the shop. Camberton regarded it apprehensively as he put out the light. What if old Miller, who, according to Dinah, sometimes slept in the rear of the shop, had returned? The lawyer decided to look into that back room before searching for the loot. Tiptoeing forward, he placed his hand on the doorknob. As he turned it, slowly and silently, a strange fear gripped him. It was unusual, for, though he was not the bravest man in the world, he was certainly not one to be frightened by darkness and the angrily gleaming eyes of a cat. The touch of terror was caused by something else, he knew not what. It angered him. Forgetting his caution, he jerked the door open. An icy draft swept round him, enveloping him so completely that he shivered with intense cold. There was something wrong about this, too, this chill on a warm July night. It required all his willpower to stop the quivering of his fatty flesh as he stared into the room. It was better lighted than the other. The illumination which streamed through the window came from the rear porch light of a house next door. Camberton's nervous scrutiny sweeping the room was halted and held by an object in the darkest corner. It seemed to be the figure of a man lying on a cot. So, that old cobbler, Miller, had come back to sleep off his drunkenness here. But the odor that assailed Camberton's nostrils was not of alcohol. It was of something equally familiar, something that did not belong here. Sniffing to clear his nostrils and at the same time firmly grasping his revolver, Camberton started to slink toward the recumbent form, then stood stock still, wide-eyed with fright. The figure on the cot was sitting up, and it wasn't the figure of an old man. It was the husky, broad-shouldered figure of Tony Dinah, America's public enemy number 1. Tony Dinah's corpse at this moment should be stretched on a slab in the county morgue, was sitting up. The face of the figure seemed to gleam with a greenish phosphorescent light, making more horrible the vilipending leer that was directed at the horrified attorney. In the forehead of the face was a bullet hole, and the odor that was creeping into Camberton's brain was the odor of burnt gunpowder. His round countenance paled to sickly white. His eyes almost popped out of the thick, fleshy pouches. He moved his lips but could not utter a sound. You. He managed to croak at last. You, damn you, Danak, I killed you once and I'll kill you again. He aimed his pistol at the apparition. The shanty seemed to shake as the gun roared again and again. The spurts of gunfire seemed to pierce right through the figure, which rose slowly from the cot and moved relentlessly toward Camberton, step by step. The lawyer backed away from it, firing desperately. Try as he might, he could not turn and run. The eyes staring into his with a hypnotic fixedness seemed to fasten his own with invisible bands, permitting him to step back only as far as the other had stepped forward, no farther. Sobbing wildly, Camberton pulled out his other gun and emptied its contents at the wraith. Automatically his twitching fingers jerked at the triggers of the emptied weapons, clicking them futilely. That was the way the police squad car crew found him, idiotically clicking the triggers of 2 empty guns. The shooting had aroused the neighborhood and brought the prowl car to number 692 within 3 minutes of the first crack of the first gun. The lifeless body of old Fred Miller, riddled with the bullets from the attorney's pistols, lay on the cot. That was all that the police saw, that and the drooling madman who had once been Horace G. Camberton, well-known criminal attorney, pressing the revolver triggers like an automaton. It is hardly likely that he will ever be tried for the murder of the aged shoemaker because he does not seem able to comprehend what he's done. In an asylum for the criminal insane, he crouches in his cell, insisting that he and Danak were the only occupants of the back room at number 692. Few people are permitted to visit the broken attorney. Fewer care to do so, since, as the authorities explain it, the mad terror which creeps over his face at intervals is of such awfulness that the most hardened observers shudder at the sight of it. The intervals are becoming more and more frequent. And, should the apparent suffering he experiences in these intervals become a permanent mental condition, it will not be necessary to punish Horace L. Camberton further for his crimes.